Think back to something that something you've learnt relatively recently that you found challenging, or something you learnt some time ago which you found challenging to understand. The chances are that when you learnt about it, there were large areas of it which you understood, but there were certain sticking points that you had which you struggled to get past. And this is the same for most people who, in their learning, they'll have what we term as a muddiest point. And so certain lectures or teaching sessions will have a muddiest point within them, something which they find a struggle to understand, something which students find difficult to move beyond. And they might not be the same muddy points for all of your students, but you'll have, if you think about it, if you think about what you've taught, there'll be certain things which the students struggled with and you struggled to get across to them. So these muddiest points can be ideal focuses for formative assessment to try to understand how much sense making is going on. You can also focus your formative assessments around key learning outcomes. So the key take-home messages that you want to get your students to understand from your learning session. Very often, as stated previously, it can be quite difficult to understand what the students are picking up without having some kind of way of testing their understanding. And so if you're wanting to ask the class, if you're wanting to find out how they're getting on with this, then you can ask the class questions. This is okay if in small learning group, particularly if you've got a small learning group that are engaging well, but can very quickly run into difficulties if you've got a very large teaching group or even a moderate sized teaching group where you'll find that some students are quite happy to remain quiet and let other people do all of the work of answering the questions, and you may never find out how much learning is going on within their heads. So you need to start getting a little bit more exploratory with the things that you're doing to measure the level of learning that's going on. And so you can ask the class questions, and we certainly suggest that you could carry on asking the class questions, but you should also consider using some other tools such as either short written tests. These might be quiz sheets which you can prepare before the session. Or you can use some software for interactive quizzes. Kahoot is a very good example of this. And there's a lot of free capabilities that you can use. PollDaddy and Qualtrics are also two other online pieces of software that you can use where you bring up the questions on the board and so on the overhead projector, and the students attempt to answer them, and they can put their answers in through their mobile phone. The benefit with this is that they get to answer the questions anonymously, and so they'll give them a go, and you don't have to navigate around the fear of looking at the students looking bad if they don't do well in these little quizzes or tests. If you get an idea of how many students have answered the question correctly, that can also tell you what your sense making is going on, and you can use it as an opportunity to pause the quiz and to explain what the student should have been doing or should have got as their answer. So it's very good to pick up on points where you very commonly have confusion in your lectures, or things which people very commonly get wrong. Another thing that can be very helpful is for formative assessments is to use polling software such as sli.do, which again you can access through get students to access through the mobile phone. So you go into Slido, you set up a screen, you then give them the URL for Slido and a PIN number, and they enter this unique screen. And so they can stick up questions and responses to things that you're asking them to do anonymously, and you can pick them up from time to time and have a look at them in order to use that sort of barometer of the level of learning that's going on in the classroom and whether your students are struggling. If you don't like software, a simple alternative to this can be using the 5-finger method. So if you think about a Likert scale, so it says from really don't understand to don't understand to neutral, going okay, to yes, I do understand, and I've got a good grasp of this, an excellent grasp of this being 5 fingers, then you can move from 1 finger from really don't understand and totally lost to 5 fingers being I understand completely, and have really grasped this, and you can just get the students to hold up their hands with a number of fingers, and that can tell you in a snapshot, even in a very large lecture situation, just what level of understanding is going on. And it's very helpful for the students then to be able to get some feedback. If you say, right, did you understand that? And they hold their hands up, and then you can say, right, well, this is what I actually meant. You can give the students group work activity and get them to present their findings. This might be a simple collection of notes. It might be a 5-minute oral presentation. It might be some kind of artifact you get them to create, like an infographic or a mind map or similar. And through doing this, you can interrogate their knowledge, and you can also gives you an opportunity to have a focus around which you can base your feedback. Lab reports and then responses to lab reports can be used for formative assessment. Another one you can use is group work, or a Padlet is an online version of this, to allow Miro is another alternative piece of software, to allow the staff to do the equivalent of, so the students to do an equivalent of a sticky note exercise, where they take elements that they want to you want them to add to a whiteboard, and you give them sticky notes. They write their notes down on the so what they want to say down the sticky notes. This might be their answers or their votes or their thoughts about something, and they put them up on the walls of the lecture theatre or on notice boards you set up for this, and that way you can get a snapshot of all of the thoughts of the class on that, and they can see what other people are thinking. Padlet and Miro do exactly the same thing, but they do it in an online format, and they're both very easy to use. So those are just some examples of how you can go about doing formative feedback in the classroom. But draw all of these ideas and any ideas you come up with beyond this, because really this is only governed by what your imagination can come up with. And think about what you're trying to do with it. You're trying to assess the level of learning of the students to work out what you do next as the instructor. But from the student's perspective, they're trying to benchmark to understand whether they've learnt enough, and to get some feedback to shape their future learning, so they can focus on the areas they don't think they're doing so well on, or they can work out where they need to take their learning next.